Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 7th webinar in the second Global Summit on Food Fortification virtual series, focused today on rice fortification, a key opportunity to reach people with fortified food. My name is Paul Newnham. I'm the director of the Sustainable Development Goal 2 Advocacy Hub and the coordinator of the Chef's Manifesto. And it's so exciting to be able to welcome you to this conversation. We have an amazing lineup, and we're hoping that you're going to be able to engage in conversations and questions as we go through the next couple of hours. We're delighted to welcome to this conversation today, which has been co-convened by the World Food Programme, the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, OLAM International, Food Fortification Initiative, Nutrition International, the Chef's Manifesto, GAIN, the Micronutrient Forum, and Harvest Plus. And so it's a real group that's come together here, and it's going to be super exciting. We have simultaneous French and Spanish interpretation for this webinar. And since we have speakers that will not be speaking in English at various points in the webinar, please go down and select now. There's a little globe down the bottom of Zoom, and select the language that you would like to listen in on. And so if you're listening in English, then please just click that, and then it will have live translation in English, and you'll be able to hear the webinar. It's really important to do that. We're also adding into the chat function additional instructions in different languages from our translators. And I just want to say upfront, thank you to our translators for the great job that I know they're going to do today to help everyone be able to participate. We are also going to ask people around, if you have questions, to use the Q&A. And so we're going to be quite strict on this, and this is just going to help us to be able to really deal with the questions that come in. So if you've got a question, go to that Q&A function. You can actually you can write your question in, and then we'll either try and find time to actually bring the question in if there's space, or also for some questions, somebody might jot in an answer there. And so if you've got questions, please use Q&A. We also wanted to have the chat function open, but we're not going to be taking questions from the chat function. It's just too hard to do both. So we're going to have questions in Q&A and chat in chat. In the chat function, you can share experiences, you can comment on a presentation, add a link to a relevant article or a story or publication, or just say hi. And maybe, just to get us started, I've seen a few people there that have already done this, but just let us know where you're dialing in from. It's always good to know who's on the call, where they're coming from, and it just helps for our speakers and for us to kind of just have a good feel. So it's great to see people coming in from Bangladesh, from Austria, from Switzerland, from India, Senegal, so many places, Panama. I think we're covering most of the continents, which is absolutely awesome. So please use that chat function. Let people know who's on, and use that to comment, and Q&A for Q&A. And then if you haven't yet, go to that interpretation now and select the language that is going to help you to participate the most. We also are live streaming this on the GAIN website and the YouTube channel. And so if you've got other friends that you want to join, or people that you want to send this on to, or you're on social media, please go on there and share that link out, and that can get going. So we're going to help set the stage for today's event. We're going to screen for the first time a new short film on the tremendous potential of rice fortification and how that can really combat micronutrient deficiencies, this time particularly in West Africa. And it's featuring a great Ghanaian chef, Chef Elijah, who is going to show us a little bit of his story and the story of rice in West Africa. So we're going to put the video on, and then we'll be straight back into our scene setting presentations.
Multiple forms of malnutrition exist in West Africa, particularly amongst women of childbearing age and children. This can cause children's brains to underdevelop. They are unable to pay attention and learn optimally at school, not to mention major health problems throughout their lives. The double burden of malnutrition is increasing at alarming rates. Anemia, stunting, starvation and wasting, low birth weight alongside obesity and overweightness. This is why we need to act now.
My name is Chef Elijah Amu Ado, founder and executive director of Food for All Africa. Food for All operates West Africa's first and largest food bank in Ghana. We work with businesses to recover excess food to feed vulnerable in society through programs such as school feeding, monthly community hot meals programs.
Everyone, everywhere should be eating a good nutritious food that is delicious and diverse each day, packed with nutritious ingredients. Unfortunately, this is not possible for 3 billion people around the world who cannot access or afford healthy, nutritious food each day. We need to ensure all people have the nutrients they need to be healthy and live a full life. Fortified ingredients are one solution in West Africa that can help ensure good food for all. To be healthy and give our children the best start to life, diverse diet is important. We all need a mix of vitamins and minerals, such as folate to grow healthy babies, and iron, folate and B12 to combat anemia.
Fortification has been an important part of human nutrition for so many years. In 1999, Ghana passed its first fortification law, which ensured we had salt iodized. Fortification since then has played a critical role in managing malnutrition. Some foods in Ghana that are fortified include wheat, salt, and quite recently with the introduction of fortified rice. I am preparing fortified vegetable rice and egg stew for beneficiaries of our hot meals program. Rice is a major staple of most West Africans, with the average Ghanaian taking over 60 kilos of rice in a year. Fortification is done to improve and optimize the nutritional status of the product. Imagine how we can help our children grow and learn if we include fortified rice in school feeding program, especially in vulnerable communities where most children are malnourished. Fortification or other fortification processes is done in a protected environment. The fortification of rice improves the nutritional value of the rice. However, it doesn't lose the taste, the look, and the texture. Fortified products are usually labeled fortified with micronutrients on its labeling, and it can be found in every sector of the food supply chain. The taste, the texture is the same as normal rice, yet very, very nutritious. Now join me. Let's share fortified rice to our beneficiaries.
I love helping people receive healthy, delicious food.
They can't taste the difference. Fortified rice can benefit and serve people from all walks of life.
I like it.
Fortified rice is a game changer and no-brainer. Consuming fortified rice doesn't change your dietary habits, and it is good for you and your family's health.
Well, thank you to Chef Elijah for sharing with us that story. And as we continue on in our conversation, it's just great to have that reminder of fortification and fortified rice from a chef. And we're going to hear from another chef later today. But hearing from a chef, you know, that it doesn't impact the taste and how it can have these impacts. And so we're going to hear more about updates shortly. So we're going to go straight to our presenters. I want to encourage you and just remind you, use the chat, please, for conversations. We're also going to be dropping in bios for some of our presenters as we go, just so that we can save time and really get into the discussion around the issues. We're just going to give their fuller bios there, and I'm going to do a more informal introduction, and then that will hopefully keep the conversation going. Also on questions, make sure questions are going in there and chat into the chat. So we're going to go straight on, and we're going to hear about some of the latest progress in attempts to transition from unfortified to fortified rice in countries with a high burden of malnutrition. And we're going to share some results of some new delivery platforms and discuss countries who wield the greatest potential for benefiting rice fortification. So we're going to jump up in first with a conversation around progress that's been made today. And I'm going to invite Corinne, who is a food fortification advisor from the nutrition division at the World Food Programme. So Corinne, over to you to give us an update on progress made today.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. I'm not quite sure why my video isn't on, but I have activated it. So if it's not on my end, I can go ahead and keep going. I would like to thank Paul for the introduction, as well as all of my colleagues who have joined me here today to speak with you about the untapped potential of fortified rice, as well as all of you who have joined us virtually. As Paul mentioned, my name is Corinne Ringholz, and I work as WFP's Fortification Advisor in our Nutrition Division. Part of what is so appealing to me of this particular intervention harkens back to my training as an epidemiologist and the clear intersection between health and nutrition that this intervention can address. Next slide, please. As many of you are already aware, more than 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, otherwise known as hidden hunger, resulting from a lack of dietary diversity, either due to the cost, availability, or accessibility of a sufficiently diverse diet. This situation has become even more dire with COVID-19, as people are forced to substitute nutritionally dense food, such as vegetables and animal products, for staple foods, such as flours, rice, etc., due to the increasing costs. The full economic and human health consequences of which these substitutions are not likely to be seen for many years to come. Next slide, please. Faced with these challenges, we often look for ways to improve the nutritional value of the staple foods people are already consuming. In this case, we turn our attention to rice, a staple food for nearly half the world's population, with many countries consuming in excess of 300 grams per person per day. If you think about the map I just showed of the prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies, you understand the huge overlap of places that both face hidden hunger and those that consume high amounts of rice. This overlap creates the perfect storm for where we can impact the health and nutrition of some of the world's most vulnerable people through improving the nutritional value of this rice. Next slide. If you're wondering why fortified rice doesn't have the same scale or reach as some of our other fortified staples like oils, salts, flours, it's because much of the technology and cost effectiveness has really only come about in the past couple of decades. Though you can see that in places like the US, they have made rice fortification mandatory for nearly a century. In fact, when I grew up, I never even knew that the rice I was eating had any added vitamins or minerals. Next slide. WFP has been working with governments, NGOs, academics, private sector, and others for more than a decade to better understand the potential impact of fortifying rice at scale. And we're really excited by the advancements we've seen in the past several years. Our 3 government representatives on today's panel that we'll hear from later showcase the spectrum of scale-up we can expect to see for this intervention. Ivory Coast has been an early adopter of the concept of fortifying rice in West Africa, stating early on how they wish to make it mandatory and investing in the infrastructure needed to support local private sector to fortify this rice. Peru went from 0 to more than 2 million school children receiving fortified rice in under a year once they decided to include it in their national school feeding program, and just approved legislation that will require all rice, whether domestic or imported, to be fortified, providing access to this valuable product for all Peruvians. Last but definitely not least, we have Bangladesh. And while I do not want to steal Mr. Das's thunder, we'll speak about them very briefly momentarily. Next slide, please. When we think about the modalities to introduce fortified rice to a population, there are a number of options to consider, each of which is appropriate for a specific context. Not surprisingly, we tend to advocate for mandatory fortification in most places, as it provides the framework for the highest possible impact at the lowest per capita cost. My colleague Yannick will go a bit deeper into some of the various distribution platforms, but I only wish to highlight that again, there's a spectrum of modalities we can take advantage of, all the way from social protection programs, so whether the fortified rice is received as an in-kind donation or is purchased through a cash-based transfer or voucher, through to ensuring that fortified rice is available, accessible, and importantly, in demand on the open market. Next slide, please. Running a bit short on time, but I just wanted to flag here that what we have found is that there are a number of steps that are absolutely critical to scaling up rice fortification in any given country, beginning with stakeholder engagement, building local production and or distribution capacity, developing QA/QC systems and enforcement mechanisms, all the way to consumer education and demand generation activities. When we try to engage in rice fortification activities without addressing this entire spectrum, scale up can be challenging, if not downright impossible. Next slide, please. On the topic of scale up, this is where we'd like to highlight the successes of our colleagues in Bangladesh, where they increased their reach by more than 20,000% in 7 years, having developed local production, testing, and monitoring systems. And in addition to that, they're already introducing several brands of fortified rice on the open market, having even made it available in an online shopping application during COVID. Next slide. We still have a ways to go to ensure that anybody who can benefit from this public health and nutrition intervention is benefiting from it. But we can see and learn from the progress we've made thus far and look forward to a future where everybody who wants to can benefit from fortified rice and have access to this life-changing potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne, and thank you. You were spot on time, and this is always a challenge, especially when you're sharing from such breadth of coverage that WFP has around the world. So thank you so much for your scene setting around progress made to date. We're going to continue, and you mentioned Yannick. I'm going to invite Yannick, the Global Director of Nutrition Improvement for DSM, who's going to talk to us a little bit now about available and innovative platforms and supply chain resilience. So over to you, Yannick.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, bonjour, and buenos dias a todos. Very happy first to see so many friends attending the webinar. As Paul mentioned, my name is Yannick, and I'm leading DSM Nutrition Improvement segment, which focuses mainly on staple food fortification and specifically on rice fortification, which we believe can be a game changer for micronutrient malnutrition. So what I'll be talking today will be about where fortified rice is currently available, and what are a few examples of potential platforms where we believe it could actually be scaled up to expand its reach. So I will start also, and I will carry on to also highlight quickly a few examples of how the supply chain has proved to be resilient during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So it's a bit of a repeat from my colleague, Corinne. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So well, just to highlight that fortified rice today can really be found in 3 distinct channels, I would say. First one is mandatory. And as Corinne mentioned, I mean, that's pretty much when all the rice in all channels have to be fortified by law. Of course, quality control here and enforcement is a key focus area here. And we have now 7 countries globally who have mandatory fortification of rice. And I believe Peru is the 8th one, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll hear about that later. The second channel is what we call social safety net. So it's pretty much, as Corinne mentioned already, all the government distribution programs, but also United Nations agencies like WFP and also NGOs, when we are targeting distribution to the poorest household or even school feeding, for instance. Last is voluntary situation, where you may or may not have standards in place. And it's pretty much up to the industry to decide to fortify the rice product. And we'll hear about a great example later from our friends at Olam International. That's a pretty interesting channel to consider as well, because it's consumer driven here, obviously. And we are seeing now more than before that consumers from the lower part of the economic pyramid are actually turning more and more towards staple food. Why? Because they cannot afford anymore to consume a diversified diet due to the economic crisis linked to the pandemic, obviously. And at least, I mean, by ensuring the rice they are consuming every day contains the nutrients they need to strengthen their immune system would be great. So it's a great channel to consider. And we are actually seeing at DSM demand for a more nutritious rice coming from all parts of the world, also coming from North America and Europe. Next slide, please. So just highlighting here 3 examples of potential innovative platforms where we believe, as I said earlier, that fortified rice could be a great vehicle to improve malnutrition. First one is vaccination and looking at ways to tie up the ongoing vaccination campaign against COVID with nutrition improvement here. We already know that immunization and good nutrition go hand in hand. And typically, children who are malnourished have a poor immune system, and they are therefore more vulnerable to diseases, including COVID here, which means that immunization is even more important for them. There are quite a few recent studies that are showing that nutrition is actually one of the possible factors which is influencing the effectiveness of the COVID vaccine. So if we can find a way to tackle macronutrient malnutrition by providing fortified rice or other fortified foods, right now, when a large part of the developing world has yet to receive a vaccine still. So that would probably give us a chance to make the response to a vaccine quicker, more robust, and also probably more long-lasting. So it will be an interesting platform to consider here. Second one is workforce nutrition. We all know that good nutrition is a key driver for both healthy lives and also healthy business as well. But still today, I mean, poor diet on the job is costing countries around the world up to 20% in lost productivity. But if you invest in workforce nutrition programs, trying to combine access to fortified product like fortified rice to nutrition education, it's a no-brainer. It's a clear win-win for both employees, workers, and the organizations they are working for. And we got some pretty compelling examples already where fortified rice is being used as a vehicle to improve workforce nutrition. In Bangladesh, for instance, with garment industry. And we at DSM, we are also providing fortified rice as a daily meal to our factory workers in India and Malaysia. And we are seeing the health and economic benefits as well. So, well, maybe just if you allow me here, probably a call to action to all employers that are listening in. Fortified rice is a very cost-effective product, which can be used at the workplace to improve workforce nutrition and indeed contribute to build supply chain resilience as well. Last one, school feeding. Nothing new here. We know that school feeding is a great way already to fill the nutrients gap and also obviously to boost children's immune system. But we need to ensure that we are not only feeding children, but nourishing them with nutrients-packed meal, which could contain fortified rice, for instance. And fortified rice is actually being used already in quite a few school feeding programs worldwide, like in Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Cambodia, and in Peru as well, and hopefully soon in West Africa. And India made quite the news recently by announcing their intention to fortify all the rice consumed through school feeding channels in the country, which could obviously create a huge public health impact. We could also look into the possibility of introducing fortified rice through school feeding in developed countries as well. Think about North America, think about Western Europe as well, where the pandemic has also created needs in low-income communities and children. Next slide, please. I just want to spend a bit of time here to highlight quickly a few initiatives that actually showed how resilient the supply chain has been and can be during such a pandemic situation. Quick example from Peru. So Warma is a government social safety net in Peru. And as schools were closing in the country to prevent COVID from spreading further, the program found a way to adapt to the context. And they actually managed to send over 90 metric tons of food straight to children's home so that children could still benefit from food, which, as we said earlier, can also support the immunization program. Similarly, in India, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, that the government decided to stick behind food fortification and not to pause programs, but actually scale them up, they also made changes to ensure that the Angawadi workers were able to actually deliver take-home rations directly to vulnerable populations and mainly to children, all that free of charge, obviously. And last, more on the industry side, I would say. A lot of rice millers, bread owners, startup, social enterprises decided to actually invest in innovation and to launch a few new products around fortified rice, which is quite difficult economic context, sorry. And they actually focused on developing fortified rice products, which are containing nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, supporting the immune system. And they also look into innovative formats to make sure to reach the consumer where they are, like fortified rice kernels in sachet to be blended at home to fortify directly the home rice, and also ready-to-eat meal here. So very interesting. Just to wrap up quickly, Paul. So it's a fact that fortified rice is a cost-effective intervention that can be a game changer for malnutrition when at scale. And we've seen already a couple of platforms where fortified rice could and probably should be introduced to expand the reach. But I just want to say that fortified rice is not only an intervention, it's first and foremost food. Tasty, yummy, aspirational food, which should first be appealing to the consumer and the beneficiary and made available at a price that they can afford. So I'm very happy to see chefs like Chef Elijah in Ghana and Chef Rudika in India who are actually believing in fortified rice and integrated it in their own programs and recipes. So really, let's make sure that we can all work together to ensure that fortified rice can be made available to all in all these innovative platforms. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Yannick, and really appreciate the passion there for fortification and giving us a good summary of the innovative platforms and supply chain resilience. And we're going to continue in these scene-setting conversations now. I'm going to invite Manpreet, who is the Senior Technical Advisor for Food Fortification at Nutrition International. And Manpreet's going to talk about identifying new countries and methodologies to identify potential impact. So over to you, Manpreet.
Thank you so much, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Manpreet Chadha from Nutrition International. And in my presentation, I'm going to walk you through the methodology that Nutrition International Food Fortification Initiative and Emory Center for Spina Bifida Prevention, we jointly finalized to identify potential countries with immediate scope for large-scale food fortification of cereal grains and also estimate reach and benefits from employing fortification as a strategy to address micronutrient malnutrition. Next, please. Thanks. So to select countries with highest and most immediate potential to address nutritional anemia and neural tube defects through fortification of cereal grains, our team followed a three-step process, as you can see on the slide. We combined quantitative and qualitative assessments. While we assess the scope and impact through both wheat flour and rice fortification, in this presentation, I'm only going to present to you the findings and the methodology from assessment of rice fortification as a strategy. We have also published this methodology and findings in Nutrients Journal in January this year, and you can find the details of the study through the information that has been provided at the bottom of this slide. Now, talking about the process, our country selection actually began with 76 countries that was suggested by the collaborating partners, and this was based on our knowledge and experience of fortification in these countries. The first step was actually to assess these countries for high prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies, and we reviewed their data on prevalence of anemia and neural tube defects. We shortlisted countries and then assessed them for the opportunity through rice fortification in step. A country was understood to have potential through rice fortification if the daily per capita consumption of rice was high enough to make an impact, that is more than equal to 75 grams per capita per day. And the percentage of rice that was being industrially milled was also high, that is more than 75%. And imports of rice was considered to have a high potential for being industrially milled. Special consideration was given to the coverage of ongoing rice fortification efforts in the country to assess whether any additional efforts would even be needed or would make an impact. The idea was to exclude any country that is already fortifying more than 50% of its industrially milled rice. This quantitative process led us to identify 9 countries out of the initial list of 76 countries. And then these were assessed qualitatively for the scope of rice fortification in these countries. Our team reviewed each country from an optimal rice fortification design perspective, and this included review of their fortification legislation, the fortification standards that the country had, the enabling environment, the political will, the opportunity to leverage a high potential platform, say high imports or strong social protection programs, as both Yannick and Corinne have talked about. This was done to assess what would it take for these 9 countries that really have the potential to have a very strong rice fortification program to design or strengthen and implement a rice fortification plan and program. These 9 countries were then assessed for their health and economic benefits through the intervention. Next, please. Thanks. To quantify the number of people reached through adequately fortified rice in a country, we first reviewed their data on local production and looked at the trade dynamics in terms of what was the import and export of rice to estimate what is the total rice availability in the country for human consumption. Then assessing what proportion of this rice was industrially milled and not currently being fortified, we were able to calculate the volume of fortifiable rice that had the potential to be fortified. Then based on per capita consumption of rice and total population of a country, we were able to assess what would be the annual reach through rice fortification at scale. And based on the proportion of women in the country, we also assessed the number of total women who could be reached through adequately fortified rice. Once we had the reach estimate, Nutrition International's Health and Economics Unit team assessed the health and economic benefits that could be achieved through rice fortification in these 9 countries. To do that, they actually looked at the existing prevalence of anemia in a country, considered an effect size of 34% reduction in anemia through fortification, and based on the severity of anemia, the team calculated the number of anemia case years that could be averted in women through rice fortification. And to estimate the number of cases of NTDs averted in a country, the team considered the recommended level of folic acid in rice fortification standards for that country based on the consumption, the pre and post fortification prevalence of NTDs in these countries, and the impact that could be achieved based on the type, the subgroup of NTDs that were prevalent in these countries. The total number of case years of anemia in women averted and the total number of NTD cases averted were then used to calculate the total DALYs averted, which is disability adjusted life years. And then these DALIs averted, the number of DALIs averted, were then monetized by the team. Next, please. Thank you. So this is my last slide. I'm presenting to you the results from this assessment in these 9 countries and these 9 countries are highlighted in red on this map. We estimated that rice fortification in these countries has a potential to annually reach 1.9 billion people and avert over 55 million case years of anemia in women, 36,000 cases of NTDs, 32,000 child deaths, and 3.9 million DALIs. And these could lead to a saving of 27 billion US dollars. In addition to these 9 countries, 17 other countries have also been identified through different assessments by partners. We have gain and partner assessment, we have FFI supply chain assessment, and these assessments have identified 17 countries that also have high potential through rice fortification. And these 17 countries have been highlighted in blue on this map. And with that, I end my presentation and hand it back to Paul. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Manpreet, for just presenting us this snapshot, and I really appreciate it. And it's great also, all of these initial scene-setting presentations are stimulating questions and conversation. If you have questions, go across to the Q&A or to the chat. It's great to see a lot of that is being answered as we go. So if you are hearing things that you want some clarification on or anything, please go and check that out. We have now the pleasure to welcome Scott, who is the director of the Food Fortification Initiative. And Scott is going to come and speak to us about quality and costing considerations for rice fortification. So over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Paul. And as Paul mentioned, I'm the director of the Food Fortification Initiative, a public-private civic partnership that seeks to build healthier future for cereal grain fortification, through cereal grain fortification. Manpreet mentioned some staggering numbers, and I think this is a good follow-up to her comments on, so what's the cost? So if you remember, or if you looked at the flyer for the webinar, I was quoted saying the time to scale up rice fortification and help more than 1 billion people across have access to the micronutrients they need is now. So I'm hopeful that my presentation, as well as the other presentations, the panel discussion, will accelerate our efforts in scaling up rice fortification. And again, I'm going to specifically discuss quality requirements and cost of fortified rice. Next slide. So interestingly, I pulled this slide from a presentation at the Scaling Up Rice Fortification in Asia Partners meeting. It was held in Bangkok in October of 2014, now 7 years ago. The fact that the meeting was so long ago and yet we still have so much work to do in itself is a strong message that we need to work harder to make rice fortification a common milling practice across the globe. Current estimates that are less than 1% of industrially milled rice is fortified. So again, looking at the slide, storage, preparation, and acceptance are the key parameters in producing quality fortified rice. If all three are delivered, the efficacy is simply an outcome. So during storage, retention and stability of the nutrients is critical, creating a product that can have the desired health impact. Unlike wheat flour fortification, where a dry pre-mix powder is added to a milled wheat flour, rice fortification involves producing fortified kernels and then blending those kernels
Hi, I think we've lost Scott. Checking.
Confirming we've lost Scott.
We've lost Scott. Okay, thank you, Edwin. Is Becky here?
Yes, hi everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
Are you still able to see Scott's screen?
We can get that straight back up for you if you want to.
Okay,
jump in.
great. Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much for the flexibility.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'll take over for Scott until he's able to come back online. Hi everyone, my name is Becky Sang. I support Scott at the Food Fortification Initiative as the Asia Pacific Technical Lead. And I also work on rice fortification. So as Scott was saying, one of the main critical areas of success for fortified rice is ensuring that you have good quality of fortified rice. It's not enough that the micronutrients are within the rice. You need to make sure that it is stable during storage. The micronutrients are stable during storage. You need to make sure that there are limited losses when the food is being prepared. That meaning rinsing, cooking, during multiple kinds of preparation that occur throughout the world, that those kernels do not fall apart, break, and that when it's added to rice, it still is acceptable in appearance, shape, and color to consumers. And finally, we also want to make sure that the rice is actually, the nutrients within the rice are available in the body when it gets to the consumer. And that means that you really have to have that successful series of actions throughout that supply chain to really ensure that the food is available or the micronutrients are available at the consumer. Next slide, please. Next, you're going to see a screenshot of a spreadsheet. We really don't expect you to be able to read it, but in Scott's first job, he spent 30 years as an operations leader working with the cereal grain mills all over the world. And he often had to create or review capital requests to build a mill, expand a mill, or upgrade a mill. And in order to do that, they had to run cost and margin models to justify that investment. This example.
Becky, I think Scott's just joined back. I'm just wondering whether you want to hand back over. Scott, are you there?
I was.
Okay, maybe Scott isn't there. Okay, keep going, Becky. Sorry.
All right, I will keep going. All right, so in order.
Hi, Scott. Please go ahead if you're connected.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And now I can't if you're speaking still.
Can you? I am about.
I think, Scott, the signal's dropping in and out. Maybe just in the interests of time, Becky, do you want to finish the presentation now?
Yes, happy to.
Thank you,
what
Becky.
no problem. So where I was where I left off was basically, there has to be a cost justification for the private sector in order to invest in rice fortification. They're not going to do it necessarily just for the good of the nutrition of the population. They need to also have it to be able to make their investments back in profits. So in Scott's old position at Cargill, he would run cost and margin models to justify that investment. So here our example estimates the cost to build high quality, emphasis on high quality extrusion facilities to produce fortified kernels. The model estimates the capital costs, material costs, operating costs, the quantitative testing costs, packaging costs, taxes, margin, and other miscellaneous costs. So as you can see, there's a lot of factors that go into whether investing in a fortified kernel production plant and blending into rice to make it fortified is going to be an economic investment for companies. This model can be adapted to any country. The model assumes that investment in a state-of-the-art extrusion facility, one that can produce fortified kernels at the quality that meets all of the parameters that I mentioned in the slide previous to produce the fortified kernels at an hourly rate of 500 kilograms per hour. At a 1 to 100 blending ratio, the annual volume of rice that would need to be fortified is 300 metric tons. Of course, if you double that, if you blend at 1 to 200, the rice volume would need to be 600 metric tons, 600,000 metric tons. This type of facility will produce high quality fortified rice kernels indistinguishable to an average consumer. The model does not include other costs such as blending, transportation, etc. With a plant operating at such scale, these costs will be minuscule. The model is ultra conservative. If the demand for fortified kernels picks up exponentially, for example, a larger extrusion line can be installed, which can lower the cost even more. Larger extrusion lines can reach up to 1 metric tons, 2 metric tons per hour per plant. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to show the current cost of fortified kernels in different countries to understand the difference, the effect on the retail cost of rice. Rice is a globally traded fungible commodity, so as a result, price fluctuations can be quite dramatic depending on the crop year, weather, etc., other issues. The estimates on this slide, I just want to emphasize, do not reflect the cost of fortified rice across the world. It only shares the data that I was able to collect from partners for select countries. You'll notice that there is some color coding that reflects a generic reflection of the rice standard or the nutrients required to be included in that fortified kernel, since that does affect the price of the rice. The cost increases cited are for the fortified kernel supply only, and they don't include any transportation or blending costs. The costs will range from minuscule to expensive to depending on the country, the source of the fortified kernels, volumes, and etc. So from these examples, you can see that Bangladesh includes several vitamins and minerals, including vitamin A in its standard. The increase in the retail price is $22 per metric ton, and that translates into a retail price of 2.7 to 4.4% of the retail price. In India, we see a really relative to Bangladesh, a lower incremental cost of fortified rice at $9 per metric ton. And that translates into fortification increasing the retail cost of rice by just under 2%. The retail cost of rice in India can change depending on the varieties, and so it can range from 400 to 2,700 USD per metric ton. We just used an average of 530 for this example, but obviously if you are fortifying a much higher grade, more expensive variety of rice, the impact on that retail price is going to be much lower. Keep in mind also that the fortified kernel cost in India is based on the 2018 standards, which is very low in both vitamin B12 and folic acid when compared to WHO recommendations. And finally, two current examples from the Solomon Islands, which passed mandatory fortification in 2018, is an average of 19 USD from 2 suppliers, and an increase of the retail price of fortified rice compared to non-fortified rice of 1 to 1.2%, well, 1 to 3.3 on average. So to conclude, the price of fortified rice is dramatically different in different countries, and before rice fortification is brought to scale, this is going to be common. However, once we bring rice fortification to scale, we expect that there will be a lower incremental price increase of, we're hoping, less than $10 USD per metric ton. And as a comparison, when we talk about fortifying wheat flour, that's about 3 to 5 USD per metric ton. The retail cost of rice is more expensive than wheat flour, and so we should expect to see, when we reach scale, a 1 to 2% cost increase in the retail price. In short, rice fortification has tremendous benefit for a small cost, just like other fortification vehicles. If we work together, we can bring rice fortification to scale, and we think that time is now to help more than 1 billion people across the world access micronutrients that they need through a food that they already commonly consume every day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Becky and Scott. And apologies, Scott, for the connection issue there, but thank you so much, Becky, for jumping in. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you for such a enlightening presentation. We're going to now continue on. It's great to see lots of questions coming in and comments. And I just encourage you again, use the chat to comment on the conversation. It's really good to focus in on what you're hearing or share articles that are relevant around the issue. And then use the questions. There's great to see questions already being answered, but lots of conversations are happening there. So we're now going to move to our next section, which we're going to be breaking from presentations for a bit of a panel discussion, which is going to focus on country perspectives from Senegal, Bangladesh, and Peru, as well as perspective from Olam International representing industry, and also an Indian chef and restaurateur representing the Chef's Manifesto. And so for this presentation, we're going to have a number of different languages being spoken. So we're going to be starting first in French. So please make sure that you do have the language that you would like to hear. Click that little globe down the bottom and make sure you've selected it so that you can hear in your preferred language of English, Spanish, or French. And I'm also going to just ask each of our participants in this panel a question, and I'd like them to try and stick to around 5 minutes in their responses so that we do have some time to deal with the questions that are coming in, because I think there's quite a lively discussion going on, and so this is going to be really good. So we're gonna start out, and I'm going to invite Monsieur Amadou, who is from Senegal, from the Committee for Micronutrient Food Fortification, who will be speaking in French. And so it's really great to have you with us. And the question I'd like to pose is, as you've supported the introduction of fortified rice, what have some of the biggest challenges been? And based on this experience so far, what do you think it will take to really bring fortified rice to scale so that it's available and affordable to everyone? So over to you, Monsieur, and I'm going to put 5 minutes on. Thank you.
Alors, je vous remercie. Je voudrais au préalable remercier tous les collègues qui sont avec moi, qui sont de différents pays pour les différentes expériences dans la perspective de l'enrichissement du riz. Je dois dire que le Sénégal, je dois faire un bref rappel pour dire que le Sénégal s'est engagé depuis, je veux dire, depuis plus de 10 ans dans des perspectives, dans des programmes de fortification des aliments en micronutriments, notamment sous l'iodation du sel, l'enrichissement obligatoire depuis 2009 de la farine de blé tendre en fer, acide politique, etc. Le Sénégal a parallèlement également mis en place un cadre institutionnel qui regroupe un certain nombre d'acteurs, un cadre institutionnel, un cadre stratégique et politique pour accompagner ces politiques. Je dois dire que pour le riz, des études d'évaluation préalables à son enrichissement ont été réalisées en 2018. En 2018, à l'initiative de PAM et de NA Nutrition Internationale. Alors, c'est à la suite de cela. Et ces études ont servi à l'élaboration d'une feuille de route pour la mise en place de l'enrichissement du riz au Sénégal. Donc, c'est dire qu'ici, au niveau de notre pays, on s'intéresse particulièrement à ces problématiques car le riz est la céréale la plus consommée du pays et par tous les sous-groupes de population. Je rappelle que la consommation quotidienne du riz au Sénégal est de 198 grammes par habitant et par jour. Mais il faut dire que sur la base des résultats de l'enquête démographique et sociale continue qui a été menée en 2017, les taux d'anémie au niveau des enfants et au niveau des femmes demeurent encore élevés. C'est pourquoi le riz constitue pour le Comité sénégalais de fortification des éléments en micronutriments un véhicule alimentaire pour améliorer la situation nutritionnelle des populations. Alors, donc, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, nous avons mis en place une feuille de route pour la fortification et les plus grands défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés ont justement pour nom Le premier défi, c'est le manque d'évidence scientifique au niveau national pour soutenir le plaidoyer. Alors, sur ce point, je dois dire qu'un certain nombre d'études ont été menées, notamment une étude d'acceptabilité du riz enrichi par les consommateurs sénégalais. Cette étude a été faite avec l'appui du PAM et des NAI. Nous avons également mené une étude pour déterminer le niveau de rétention de micronutriments du riz enrichi en fonction des méthodes de préparation culinaire pratiquées au Sénégal. Nous avons également une étude formative descriptive pour comprendre les connaissances, attitudes, perceptions, les pratiques, etc. Ces études, le premier défi, c'est d'abord dans la conduite et la poursuite de ces études pour aller, par exemple, sur le goût, pour intégrer les pratiques culinaires, pour également, en fonction des pratiques culinaires, juger de la disponibilité et de la rétention et stabilité des nutriments. Le deuxième défi auquel nous sommes confrontés au Sénégal est lié à la production du riz, à sa transformation industrielle et à la structuration des acteurs de la filière. Je rappelle que le riz est l'objet encore de fortes importations au Sénégal. La production locale est portée par de petites exploitations et au niveau de la transformation, on a principalement de petites décortiqueuses villageoises qui sont souvent sous-occupées et de faibles capacités. En conséquence, la mise en place de mécanismes techniques et normalisation pour analyser la qualité du riz sur le marché sénégalais. Un troisième défi, le plus important, sur lequel Scott est revenu tout à l'heure, c'est relativement au coût et à la qualité. Je suis heureux d'apprendre qu'en Inde, en tout cas que par tonne métrique, on est en fonction des études qui sont disponibles, qu'on est sur des niveaux d'augmentation du prix de l'ordre de 2%, et que par rapport au détail, on devrait se soucier à des taux d'augmentation de l'ordre de 1 à 3%. Alors, donc ça, l'enjeu, c'est de faire en sorte que le riz fortifié soit accessible, abordable pour la population. Alors, sur la base de cette expérience, rapidement, il nous faut créer un environnement favorable pour la fortification du riz, incluant l'élaboration de normes pour le kernel. Le riz enrichi et la réglementation. Il faut également mettre en place un pilote pour voir la faisabilité et en tirer les leçons qui soient utiles pour la mise à l'échelle. Il faut également finaliser les études, je l'ai dit, notamment l'étude coût-efficacité de l'enrichissement, appuyer la structuration des différents segments de la filière. Il nous faut actualiser également les informations sur les carences en micronutriments. Récemment, nous avons fait une petite évaluation sur la base d'un petit échantillon qui a montré qu'il y a eu, les indicateurs ont positivement évolué. Mais enfin, il faut des ressources financières et techniques. Je pense que ça, c'est l'élément le plus important. Et puis, nous donner l'occasion aux industriels, aux producteurs et tous les acteurs du riz de s'inspirer de modèles réussis qui sont mis en œuvre un peu partout à travers le monde. Donc voilà, je pense avoir débordé de quelques secondes. Voilà les quelques éléments que je voudrais partager dans le cadre de ce webinaire avec mes autres collègues du bout du monde. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Monsieur. This has been very good, and I really appreciate the context there in Senegal. And we're going to hopefully have some time for some discussion as we continue. I'm now going to invite Mr. Ram Chandra Das, who's the Director General of the Department of Women Affairs in Bangladesh, to come on. And I'm going to ask you, Ram, what has Bangladesh's experience been with rice fortification, and what will Bangladesh's pathway to scale up rice fortification look like? So I'm just going to give you 5 minutes and love to hear your response. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to you all. I am a civil servant in Bangladesh, and at present I am working as the Director General of the Women's Affairs Department of my country. The department is running one important program, which is the Vulnerable Group Development Program, and it is the pioneer program of rice fortification in Bangladesh. So it is my privilege to be here with all these panelists and speakers, and I am happy to share the experience what we have in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we started our journey actually in 2013, where it was a very small program and only 30,000 beneficiaries we have. But gradually we have increased. In 2020, the total number of beneficiaries in Bangladesh is about 8 million. You know, it is a huge increment in number. We have two major programs in Bangladesh run by the government. One is the food friendly program and another is the vulnerable group development program, as I have said. In 2014, while after just 1 year of the program, we conducted a survey on effectiveness, because earlier we have so many varieties of rice in Bangladesh, and you know, rice is the staple food of Bangladesh. So there was some ambiguity how it is working and how the beneficiary will accept. In 2014, we conducted acceptability survey, and it was it find very good result that those beneficiaries who are taking fortified rice, they are very much interested. And on this contest, government scaled up the program, and in 2017, another survey we conducted, which was known as the effectiveness survey. After 3 years of the program, how far we have gone, how far we have achieved, we just surveyed, and the result of the survey was also very important, and it was very positive. Hence, the result shows that the deficiency of micronutrient, especially vitamin A and zinc, it is very tremendous. And so government again started to scale up the program. Right at this moment, as I have told you earlier, it is 8 million people getting the fortified rice, and mostly they are getting the fortified rice through the government intervention to safety net programs, and presently it is also available in the market, but it is not in that much, because you know, fortifying rice is a difficult technology, and to make it perfect, government and the entrepreneurs need very strict technology to follow. That's why gradually it is increasing. In Bangladesh, we have another very important program, that is school feeding program, where we are supplying fortified biscuit to the students, and it is 3 million of primary students. So in Bangladesh, gradually, which we can see that we have started only 30,000, and at present, the total fortified rice is getting, it is 8 million, and as well as 3 million of primary students, they are also getting fortified biscuits. So in the second slide, at presently, we are producing 1 metric ton fortified rice. You have seen that government has established laboratories, government has established fortifying units, and all these units are being installed by the Bangladeshi technologists guided by WFP. We are very much thankful to WFP. At present, the ratio of kernel and rice is 1:100, and gradually we are trying to make it 1:200. Government is scaling up the process of rice fortification and wants to make it available in the open market. The government is encouraging private sector, and commercial use is gradually increasing. So private investors, they are coming forward, and we think in future it will much more available in Bangladesh. We consider the rice fortification is an effective and cost-effective intervention to address micronutrient deficiencies in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has approved a standard for rice fortification. The country is moving forward to make fortified rice available to all. through the government safety net programs as well as commercial sale in the open market. Hope it will expand accordingly. I am very much thankful to all you all, and once again I am here. If you need and if you have any question, I will be available and I will welcome you all. So thank you. Thanks a lot for listening me. Thank you very much, Paul. Over to Paul.
Thank you, Ram, and thank you so much for your generous storytelling of sharing some of the approaches that you're taking in your experience in Bangladesh. I'm sure there'll be questions coming a little bit later, but we're now going to move to Mr. Walter from Latin America. He's going to be speaking in Spanish, so please make sure you have your translation selected. He's the Director General of the National Food and Nutrition Center at the National Institute of Health for Peru. And so I'm going to ask Walter, how is the government of Peru supporting rice fortification projects? And what are the main lessons learned and recommendations to scale up rice fortification in Peru? Over to you, Walter.
Muy buenos días, un saludo de Perú para todos los que están participando en este webinar. En primer lugar, esta experiencia sobre el arroz fortificado nos permite a nosotros poder tener una alternativa complementaria a lo que se viene haciendo en la lucha contra la anemia. Siguiente, por favor. En el Perú, 1 de cada 5 mujeres en edad fértil presenta anemia y 2 de cada 5 niños menores de 35 meses de edad presenta anemia. El esfuerzo que hace el Ministerio de Salud a través de sus diferentes programas ha permitido avanzar con la suplementación con el hierro y también se desarrollan otras estrategias como la educación alimentaria y también actividades integrales de salud. Sin embargo, el trabajo desarrollado necesita ser complementado con otras acciones. La siguiente, por favor. Next slide. En este Plan Nacional para la Reducción y Control de la Anemia Materno-Infantil se establece como prioridad de salud pública luchar contra la anemia. Pero salud no puede ser suficiente para enfrentar esta problemática, se requiere también del trabajo de otros sectores, como el sector agricultura, como el sector producción, como el sector educación y también la participación de los gobiernos subnacionales en la lucha contra la anemia. Es así también que se establece como una acción importante la fortificación de alimentos. A partir de ello, el Centro Nacional de Alimentación y Nutrición del Instituto Nacional de Salud que represento trabaja con el Comité de Fortificación de Alimentos, donde participan diferentes entidades públicas y privadas, ministerios como de salud, como de agricultura, desarrollo social, programas sociales como Jaliguarma, UNEMAS, etc. Asimismo, hemos tenido la participación de los gobiernos subnacionales de San Martín y de Lambayeque, gobiernos subnacionales que tienen una importante producción de arroz y que también se muestran sensibilizados por la problemática que afecta a su población materno-infantil en el norte del país. Hemos tenido durante ese proceso la asistencia técnica y el apoyo del Programa Mundial de Alimentos, que sobre la base de la experiencia desarrollada en otros países nos ha permitido avanzar en el más breve plazo. También participó la Asociación de Molineros del Perú del Arroz y con ellos hemos trabajado 2 documentos importantes. La ficha de homologación del arroz fortificado, que para nosotros significa poder comprar este producto para los programas sociales y beneficiar en primer lugar, a los niños en edad escolar y también a los niños pequeños que pertenecen a programas sociales de los gobiernos locales. Asimismo, hemos preparado un proyecto de ley que propone la fortificación del arroz para que sea aprobado por el Poder Ejecutivo. Y nos hemos sustentado en el arroz porque es un cereal de mayor consumo de la población peruana. Las mujeres en edad fértil consumen aproximadamente 140 gramos de arroz por día y los niños entre 12 y 36 meses de edad consumen 36 gramos de arroz por día. Next slide, please. Next. Se aprobó en el Perú la ley de fortificación del arroz y ya para nosotros esto es el primer paso de lo que se viene en el futuro. Estamos trabajando con el Comité de Fortificación de Alimentos, el reglamento de la ley donde se va a comprender aspectos relacionados a la vigilancia de la calidad de la fortificación, aspectos relacionados a la promoción de su consumo y también, por supuesto, aspectos relacionados a medidas que cautelen la fortificación del arroz. La incidencia a las autoridades para la asignación de recursos, la asistencia técnica para el cumplimiento de la normativa, el control de calidad de la fortificación del arroz, la implementación de la estrategia comunicacional que muestra cómo se puede preparar y no cambia el sabor para nada de los alimentos que se consumen en todo el país, de las diferentes formas, el arroz, van a ayudar a incrementar y asegurar su consumo y con ello vamos a enfrentar a la anemia. El monitoreo y evaluación del consumo de alimentos fortificados es clave para demostrar su efecto, asimismo la generación de evidencias del efecto del arroz fortificado. Hemos leído con detenimiento que este es un aspecto importante para ir socializando esta experiencia no solamente en nuestro país, sino en la región de las Américas y otros países que sufren de la anemia en el mundo. Muchas gracias por la atención.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing such an insight into what's going on in Peru. So we're now going to invite Paul Nicholson, who is the head of rice research and sustainability, to give us an industry view from Olam International. And so, Paul, I'm going to ask you, what is the role and responsibility of the rice industry? Olam introduced a product in Ghana. What was the reasons behind this? And what are some of the benefits of fortification to improve nutrition? And maybe even just touch a little bit on the role of consumer. I'm throwing a lot at you with 5 minutes, but over to you, Paul. Thank you.
No, so thank you for the opportunity. I should probably introduce Olam to those who don't know it. Olam is a global agribusiness, and rice is one of the business units within it, and it's fairly large as far as the international volumes would be concerned. So in that global role, one of the ways we've seen growth is by giving the customer what they're looking for. We're not looking to challenge the customer, looking to meet the customer where they are through the recipes and dishes they grew up with and the adventurousness of trying something new. We want to provide that rice into those markets that best fits those needs. And fortification plays a role there. So what we're seeing is a growing desire for our consumers to be healthier. And we've introduced products, as you've said, Ghana's one, and we're introducing throughout Africa. And within our business, we act as third-party procurement suppliers for other branded businesses who also introduce fortified rice now. And they're seeing the same thing. The consumers that eat rice, and it was mentioned earlier, it's a staple crop for half the world's population, oftentimes face one of three issues. So they're facing stunting issues, they're facing anemia, or they're facing diabetes. So in Olam Rice, we've looked at ways to address this and bring options, healthier options to customers. It falls into four categories. So one of the categories is diversity of diet, which I see a rich discussion in the Q&A around diversity of diet. So Within our platform within Olam, we can also offer chia, quinoa, chickpea, mung bean, and some other commodities to offer a richer diversity of diet to our customers. Another place we've looked at, especially on the diabetes side, is to look within our value chain for what has a low glycemic index, such that we can address diabetes in the supply chain. We're excited about the scalability around nutritionally enhanced cropping, and so we're looking into those offerings as well. But the fortification issue of nutrition offers a flexibility that the others don't. So what we can do with this is target the customer's biggest desires towards healthy outcomes, and then enhance our product such that the vitamins and minerals within the product specifically address those concerns. So with mixtures of iron or zinc, of B vitamins, potentially even vitamin A, vitamin E, we can offer products that meet both the desire of the customer to stick with those traditional recipes and exploration, ambitiousness to try new foods, alongside comfort that their diet's healthier, that it's adding back minerals and vitamins that otherwise wouldn't be located in that food. This is becoming more and more crucial, and we're seeing some convergence then between the private sector and public sector, in that rice, if you look at the malnutrition statistics that Corinne shared earlier, she's absolutely right on the overlay between the rice customer and malnutrition. We're seeing in the malnutrition statistics, 65% of the country suffering are staple rice consumers. And they also have the issue where the highest moments of population growth. So the future needs also look like they're increasing. So by having the product on ground and having the facilities there, we can actually advocate for and boost availability of the fortified rice within these channels, not just within the branded segment, but also by facilitating the government's ambitions. So that's been a wonderful convergence. The biggest issue then, I think, that's missing on nutrition is just overall awareness. When we introduce product, one of the costs for us is, besides ensuring quality, shelf stability, and ensuring that the nutrients actually produce a positive result, is the awareness around the consumer on what diet is, what nutrition it even is. And so from our side, to see this work, to see this scale, we're going to need to boost awareness such that we're not asking the customers to change their behaviors greatly, which some will, but by and large, they'll want to stay within the comfort of their routine, but boost awareness on what fortification can add into their already existing diets. So meeting the customer where they are. That's something safe and nutritious and delicious.
Thank you, Paul. And I think, for the work that I'm involved with chefs, obviously one of the things is often thinking about taste, and we are going to be bringing in a chef that we work with that obviously really speaks to this kind of conversation of making sure it is tasty and delicious, and looking also at the diversity and how do you kind of bring all these interventions together. So thank you, Paul. I'm going to now invite Chef Radhika. Chef Radhika manages is the chef owner of a number of restaurants in India and based in New Delhi at the moment, and a strong advocate for the SDGs and the Chef's Manifesto and zero waste. And Chef Radhika, it's great to have you here. We've been talking a little bit over the last few weeks about different recipes and how we can experiment with fortified rice. And I know you've been looking at this. I'd like you to answer a little bit about how you're finding that. But then also, I'd love you to talk a little bit about, in light of COVID, and the impacts of nutrition and food, particularly in India. What role do you think chefs can play in advocating for nutritious foods, such as fortified foods, to ensure good food for all? So over to you. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And strangely enough, you've asked this question, and my first experience with fortified food and even fortified rice was during the second wave. I'd converted my kitchen into a soup kitchen, and we were supplying to a very, very vulnerable population. And I was cooking these 400 meals every single day by myself. And it did become a challenge because the supply chain was actually quite vulnerable at that point in time. Like there was nothing coming in. So it was either hyper local or you buy online. And that is when someone got in touch with me and offered fortified rice as an option. And I was a little skeptical initially because I hadn't ever used it. And when I did, let me tell you, we cooked like a multiple amount of dishes with it. We cooked dosas and we cooked pulaus and pilafs and biryanis and khichiris, and you could just not tell the difference. It was packaged safely and it was delivered absolutely as it should be. Like if you would look at it, you would not find any difference. So, and obviously when, so we tied up with this organization called Good Food Collective, and they would go in and distribute these meals and they would go take feedback, and no one actually ever even got to know the difference. And that was amazing because you knew that you're actually you're supplying those nutrients to these people who are vulnerable. And India is a rice eating population. An average Indian is said to consume about 5 to 6 kilos of rice a month. We produce about 85 million tons of rice and in over 6,000 varieties, which has come down from a good 1 lakh, but that's another topic for another day. And it was just a really great experience to be able to, have these meals go out to that vulnerable population. Also, I feel it's not just for the vulnerable population. It could be an unpopular opinion here, but a lot of fortified foods have nutrients which are otherwise only present in animal protein. And there are a lot of people in India who do not consume animal protein and or have allergies. And I think it's a great solution for that as well. We have been using fortified rice at home ever since too, and the accessibility is not that much. So you have to buy off Amazon and but other than that, I think it's just been all right to be able to do that. It's just adding more of a nutritional value to your meal, and everyone in the family is happy because they don't get to know any of this. So sneaking in nutrients is like a thing which we've always done in the restaurant. Like it's even when it's zero waste, we kind of like put in the zero waste segment of a condiment or something. So watermelon rind relish would go into a burger, for example. So you are not like, oh, I have to eat an entire zero waste dish. It's always about flavor. And I think the Chef's Manifesto has always told us to advocate for flavor and taste, and that first. And the sustainability angle is just something which we do anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you, Chef. And I think this is really key. And I think, the fact that there isn't this difference in taste, I think is really important, because what it does is it enables a barrier that could be there, a misunderstanding of what's there. But as you said, you're also getting all those nutrients. And I think, this is something that is really, really critical, and especially during the pandemic. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and continuing to advocate and break down those barriers around perceptions of different ingredients, because I think part of the challenge with food is we all have different perceptions of ingredients, and we misunderstand things, and there's a lot of knowledge out there. And so this is really, really great. So thank you, Chef Radhika. I'm going to actually now invite everyone who's spoken to join at the back. I'm going to ask them to put on their cameras. We have a number of questions. It's been a really lively discussion. And so we're going to ask everyone to come back onto screen. And what we're going to do is I'm going to try my best to go through some of these questions. And I've got quite a few, so we're going to have to be brief in our answers. But I would love to try and answer these. And thank you to the team behind the scenes that's been furiously typing in the chat, trying to answer some of these questions as well, so that we can make sure that this is interactive, but we've got a good amount of time, and I thank our speakers for really sticking to time, because it does allow this now. And so what I might do is just start out with a question for Corinne. I think, Corinne, are you here? I'm just going to ask Corinne, like, what's being done to bring the rice industry into the process of making fortified rice widely available? Maybe just a short reaction. We can see you, but your mute is on.
Sorry,
yeah,
I was still dealing with the earlier problems. Can you please repeat the question, Paul?
So what's being done to bring the rice industry into the process of making fortified rice more widely available?
Thanks for asking. So we work in any given country. We try to always engage the local private sector as I mentioned, as part of that initial stakeholder engagement. So it's critically important to have the government on board and have government ownership of the process in terms of sustainability, but also to get that local private sector. And so we do support small and medium enterprises. We do that through, organizations like the Sun Business Network.
Right.
And then again, we also do include the larger players, as you can see here on the panel or in this group today. We've got DSM, we've got OLAM, we've got a number of organizations with whom we partner who can provide that technical assistance to help with that capacity strengthening. So I think we look at it both from a sort of local and then a global level and try to ensure that all of the people who are required to be there, all the actors who are required to be there to achieve that scale up and sustainability are hopefully there from the very beginning, helping to shape the way we move forward.
Thanks, Corinne. Scott, any reactions on this from your perspective?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Paul?
I can.
Great. I apologize for earlier. It was a nightmare, but thanks to Becky for covering. We actually involved the private sector from the very onset when we're looking at cereal grain fortification in any country. Make sure they're at the table, they understand what's going on. And ultimately, our goal is to mandate that the cereal grains are fortified, so rice, wheat, or maize, and then have the private sector at the table to help us, understand what the implications of that are and how they have to tool up to meet those needs.
That's great. No, that's great. And maybe I'll just ask Ram, maybe from Bangladesh, from a country perspective, how does what's being done to bring the rice industry into this process with fortified rice and making it more available? You're on mute. Sorry. So. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I could understand the question, at present, what we are doing in Bangladesh, we have established 2 laboratories for testing different parameters, and we have 8 kernel industry along with 100 blending units throughout the country. The government is very positive and encouraging private sectors to come forward. Fortified rice is a good intervention so far. We know, so gradually government want to increase the ratio, and accordingly, if we proceed further, then definitely it will bring some very positive impact on industry in Bangladesh.
Thank you. No, that's great. Another question that we got was, what is the effect of fortification on the natural qualities of the food being fortified? And I'm going to go to you, Yannick, and ask you to respond to that one.
Thanks for the question, Paul. I guess. Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, there is no effect at all. And that's exactly the beauty of the technology, whichever technology you use to fortify rice. The whole point is, as was mentioned by Corinne and Manpreet before, is that we don't want to change the experience for the consumer. We need to ensure that fortified rice looks, cooks, and tastes the same as normal rice. So if you look, when you cook fortified rice, for instance, the density of the rice is the same, the cooking habit is the same, so there is no change at all. But it comes with added nutrition. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. And Chef Radhika, you talked about that when cooking and tasting that, you didn't find any differences.
Yes. I was, although really and I'll be happy if someone can answer this question for me. I was really apprehensive about washing the rice, so we could never do that.
So could maybe let's maybe bring in Paul. You know, is washing the rice an issue? Is you know, with some fortified products, I know that there is a problem that where you lose a lot of fortification with the wash. Is that an issue?
Yeah, this was something. So we spent a lot of time developing the product alongside DSM, and this specific product, fortified rice kernel, is basically a noodle cut short, and then we blend it into rice. So, you know, 99% of the product is just rice, and then it has this little rice-looking noodle in it. So you can't wash it off because the fortificants are embedded. And with all the cultures we sell to, washing rice is part of the process. In fact, it's part of the sort of almost tradition ritual in cooking rice. So it was critical, actually, that we made sure that washing didn't affect the quality. Yeah.
That's good. There's your answer, Chef.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I've got another question. Okay, this is who are the major funders of large-scale rice fortification research? And who's supporting efforts to make fortified rice widely available in developing countries? Manpreet, I'm going to go to you.
Thanks, Paul, for that question. So for the research, so basically we have fortification funders, we have organizations, we have donors that are supporting fortification efforts. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really a big fortification donor. The government of Canada through Global Affairs Canada is one of the fortification donors. We have European Commission, we have USAID, we have different fortification donors really supporting different parts and different pieces of fortification program. I would say, and fortification research really is a very critical component of every plan and program. So we really need to understand fortification research for different aspects of fortification. The health and economic benefits, the bioavailability, the consumer acceptance, the product development, how it can be introduced in a country. So I think this is a very critical part, and all the fortification donors are really supporting different parts of, I would say, different pieces of this puzzle. And sorry, what was the second part of your question, Paul?
Who's supporting efforts to make fortified rice widely available in developing countries, particularly?
So again, I would say different organizations are working in different countries and they are supporting fortification efforts. WFP, PATH, Nutrition International, we are all supporting rice fortification efforts in different countries. Depending upon where we are, fortification alliances are really supporting these efforts. So I think all the development partners who are supporting rice fortification are really coming together, and we are supporting fortification efforts in different countries. Thank you.
That's great. So as we do take fortification to different countries and make it available, we've heard from 3 country experiences. But I'd like to go back, and I might start with you in a minute, Walter. Is what are some of the first steps that should be taken? Like how do you get this going? Walter? Okay, Walter, can you hear me? Okay, maybe I'll go to you, Amadou. Amadou, are you able to?
Bueno, el primer paso es sensibilizar a nuestras autoridades. No necesariamente son de salud, pero sí son nuestras autoridades que deben saber que existe un problema. Ese problema es anemia materno-infantil. Y que una de las alternativas importantes es la fortificación de un alimento de mayor consumo. Cuando existe este compromiso, todo lo demás puede ser más fácil, dado que también se sensibiliza al productor, se sensibiliza a los gobiernos subnacionales y también la posibilidad de contar con información sobre los avances de la fortificación y contar con la asistencia técnica respectiva. Nosotros hemos tenido la oportunidad de trabajar con los productores del arroz, con los gobiernos subnacionales y también con los molineros y el Programa Mundial de Alimentos que nos dio esa información al alcance para poder desarrollar la experiencia. Si no tuviéramos ese conocimiento, es probable que nosotros estaríamos creando en este momento una alternativa alimentaria para enfrentar la anemia. Dado que la información se socializa con mayor rapidez, entonces nosotros podemos abordar la problemática que para nosotros no debemos perderlo de vista, que es enfrentar la anemia materno-infantil por los efectos que tiene nuestra población.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well done. Maybe I'll jump across. Corinne, WFP was mentioned. Is there anything you'd like to build on in this question?
In terms of how to start, I would say much of what Senor Walter just mentioned, but also we look to do things generally, we want to have a clear understanding of what the baseline is. So we generally start by doing a landscape analysis, really getting a thorough understanding of the rice landscape in general, the existing supply and value chains, and understand where we can insert these opportunities and who can benefit from it. And again, we've talked mostly about post-harvest fortification here. We believe there's room for both post-harvest and biofortification. Everything should be contextualized to the situation. We don't usually take a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. We really want to make sure it's the right approach for any given country, any given population. So I would say, and again, all of this couched in the idea that, we're not looking to sort of increase the consumption of rice in any given population. Until we can achieve a healthy and diverse diet for all, we look to make what we know they're already consuming as nutritious as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question that came in was around smaller producers. It's viable for smaller scale producers to fortify rice. What supports are available to enable SMEs and producers to fortify? Maybe Scott, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is to scale up fortification globally. West Africa was mentioned in Manpreet's presentation. And all of a sudden we're dealing with millions of tons of rice that must be fortified, and we have a market for fortified rice. And then there's going to be ample global supply of fortified rice kernels to blend with the indigenous rice. I think that's the real critical component here. There are questions about cost and impact on retail price of rice. And as we scale up rice fortification globally, the cost to fortify rice is going to go down. It just simply will happen. There'll be vast supply of fortified rice kernel suppliers that can meet those needs of all the rice mills.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in on this question? Okay, I've got another one, which is what is the evidence of rice fortification's effectiveness in improving the nutrition status of the population? Have there been any large-scale studies? What kind of studies have been done on consumer acceptability? I'm going to go to you first, Yannick.
Thanks, Paul. So, I think it's a question better addressed to either Manpreet or Corinne, but I'll try my best to answer. There's a wealth of evidence, obviously. That's an intervention which has been researched for many, many years, and we know it's effective. Just to get a couple of examples. If you look at school feeding, for instance, we know that fortified rice has an impact on improving cognition, for instance. We've also seen a lot of data in terms of the positive impact it has on anemia as well. You have a lot of studies and research that have been built in countries like India, Cambodia, and also in West Africa as well, and also Latin America. But maybe if I can switch the question to Manpreet or Corinne, if you're along, Paul.
Yeah, no, I was going to come to Corinne next and say, Corinne, yeah, please, from WFP perspective.
It's just about to try to include some resources in the chat. I think that we have a number of summaries of the evidence that you can find. There are 3 Sight and Life supplements that are dedicated to the rice fortification efforts in West Africa, Latin America, and Asia. I would definitely point the participants, the webinar participants, to those summaries. They provide a great overview of the evidence. But there are also, I saw Becky's response to this question, in terms of large scale randomized controlled studies, there for sure is not a plethora of them because there's just not the funding and there's not the situations in which we can run those sorts of studies. But there are a number of good studies that have come out. There are a number of randomized controlled trials that have come out. I believe that Becky and FFI, if I'm not mistaken, is in the process of collecting the evidence database for this, because I know we sent over what we had been working on it. So I would just sort of echo what Yannick said. There's no dearth of evidence there. There are sort of consistently these issues that come about, questions like potential for over fortification or things like that, which we continue to come up against and then continue to provide the arguments against. But it just seems like, these questions keep coming up, I think, as new segments of the population learn about rice fortification. And so we just try to be as prepared as possible. But I will insert some of these links into the chat, and then I'll turn it over to Manpreet to see if she has anything she wants to add.
Thank you, Yannick, Corinne. I really want to echo what both Yannick and Corinne said. We have a lot of efficacy evidence for rice fortification, not a lot from effectiveness, large-scale population level trials. I do know one effectiveness trial from Costa Rica wherein we could see population level impact on anemia reduction. But other than that, I don't understand. We have a lot of effectiveness large-scale trial. India could be a very potential country wherein we could have some very rich data coming up maybe in the near future, because Government of India is very excited to introduce fortified rice and all food for all social protection platforms. But other than that, we don't have a lot of population level data, effectiveness evidence for rice fortification. Thanks.
Thank you, Corinne, Manpreet, Yannick. I'm going to ask Amadou. Amadou, can you we're just talking about this research. Could you ask, is there any studies that are going to be planned in the West Africa region or in Senegal just around effectiveness?
Alors, pas à ma connaissance, je pense que c'est des choses à faire. C'est des choses, et justement, c'est des éléments que nous attendons pour porter le plaidoyer auprès des autorités. Auprès des autorités, c'est-à-dire sur le coût-bénéfice en matière de santé et de réduction des carences. Je pense que c'est des choses sur lesquelles également nous sommes attendus. Tout à l'heure, vous parlez également de la forte prédominance des petits producteurs de riz, notamment en Afrique, au Sénégal et en Afrique de l'Ouest généralement. Je pense que ce soit au niveau de la production comme au niveau de la transformation, c'est le type d'acteurs que nous avons. Donc ça, c'est un problème. Et souvent, que ce soit pour la production, en général, ce n'est pas des productions qui sont destinées vers le marché. Je pense que ce sont des types de challenges spécifiques à la problématique de la fortification du riz en Afrique de l'Ouest que nous allons devoir prendre en charge dans nos stratégies nationales relativement à la fortification du riz. C'est bon, Paul? Alors, ça va? Donc cela pose la problématique de la disponibilité du riz enrichi au niveau local, voilà, localement. Localement, parce qu'il y a le type de production, que ce soit la production industrielle ou la production agricole du riz. Souvent, c'est le fait de petits producteurs qui sont très nombreux, et il y a un souci de structuration de l'ensemble de ces acteurs afin de nous assurer de la disponibilité de ce riz enrichi au niveau local. Merci.
Thank you, Amadou. And Scott, I think you've got a comment to build.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Paul?
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, there's a slight delay, but please go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to make a high-level comment, and Paul may have an opinion on this, Paul Nicholson. If you look at cereal grains, what are they? It's a matrix of protein, starch, in a bran layer. And if you look at vitamins and minerals, what are they? For the most part, B vitamins and iron are stable components. We have fortified wheat flour for 100 years, maybe, I forget exactly how long, to think that we have to spend countless resources to say, we'll prove that rice works when we know wheat works, to me is a bit, I have a problem with that, honestly. If I could revert back to slide 2 in my presentation, Becky ended up sharing, if we can meet the quality requirements to make fortified rice, yeah, I have no protein matrix in a staple food. But again, Paul may have a different opinion, but.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I probably should. So we would love to see the studies that are being recommended. However, I think it would miss the point somewhat. And the analogy I would use here is early on in the nutrition efforts, there was a push towards brown rice. Well, why doesn't everybody just eat brown rice, right? Brown rice still has the bran on, and that has, all these healthy vitamins, minerals, and oils. And the truth is the consumer never picked up brown rice. And the reason why is it doesn't meet the recipes. It doesn't meet their experience of food. So you can put the brown rice in the market, but that doesn't mean they pick it up. And so it won't stop us from offering the fortified product into the market, because I think the overall availability of nutrition is actually the issue at the end of the day. Ensuring this broader availability of vitamins and minerals into a wider array of food products is not the, but a solution to dietary issues. And where rice is the staple, as I said before, we tend to see higher prevalence of malnutrition. So it's critical that the rice supply chain, probably even more than wheat, which has seen these years of success, and I think people just take for granted, starts becoming fortified as well into these markets, because there's fairly serious issues to catch up on.
Yeah. And I know we're going to go, Yannick, did you want to jump in?
No, I actually had a question for you, Paul. So that's not very well doing the work, right? So, I mean, what do you see as the role of chef here in terms of promoting the benefits of fortified foods in general? Maybe a question for you and for Chef Radhika as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pass that across to you, Chef Radhika, and then I can jump in afterwards. But I think maybe if you can respond, because I think your question earlier actually around the fortification is part of the answer. But over to you.
I would say that it's the same role as we have in most of the problems with the food system. It's about advocating for good food for all, and that we do through our recipes, our menus, our advocacy on social media, the fact that by now we do have some sort of a seat on the table, which is why maybe I'm here right now, and we can have this conversation. So I think the role is pretty much the same, and I think a chef's job is always to just ensure that your food is always delicious. And I mean, we do put chefs in a box where we think that the chef is the person who cooks in a restaurant. However, behind so many cans in a supermarket is a research chef, or in a school canteen is a research chef, or is a chef. And I think we forget that, and that's where a lot of our role is as well.
Yeah. No, and I think it's information is one of the, in working with chefs, just talking about fortification, the first question is, well, we should have a more balanced diet. And then the question is, yes, okay, but what if you can't have access, or what if there's a challenge? And then you start to go, but okay, what is this food? What is fortified food? Like, tell me about it. I think there's a misunderstanding of what fortification is. And I think, Scott, you started to hit on the nail on the head a little bit, that it's proteins and it's this, but people don't think about food that way. That's how scientists think about food, or that's how nutritionists think about food. People think about food in texture, taste, flavor, culture. And so when they think about it that way, and this is where a chef can bring in that conversation, it's also about how it's presented. And I think, Paul, you mentioned this brown rice versus white rice. Absolutely brilliant example, because, for many of us, we all know what's better for us. It doesn't mean we always do what's better for us. Even if you have the best science, even a condition that you need to do it, you don't always do it, because food is so much more than that. And I think this is at the heart of the challenge, but I think it's also the heart of the opportunity. And so I think by bringing fortified ingredients into everyday ingredients in a way that doesn't taste different, doesn't add costs, doesn't change them, I think there is this opportunity. I know we started this conversation about evidence and reports, and I thank the panelists for putting quite a few. I think, Corinne, you've been putting quite a few links in the chat box, and others. Please have a look at those links. There's a lot of information there. We've got one more question. And so I just want to understand, and it kind of goes to this conversation, but how does rice fit into a country's overall fortification program? And how can it be coordinated with other fortified foods? So maybe, Corinne, do you want to just speak at the global level? And then maybe I'm going to ask you, Manpreet, to talk more at a country level.
Sure. So before, again, as I mentioned, everything is contextualized, right? Everything should be done at the local level. But broadly speaking, we try to understand what is the micronutrient gap, what's the nutrient gap, and how can we best fill it, and what are the commodities people are already consuming. So we do take a look at the other staple foods, at the overall dietary diversity, and try to understand what is it that we can provide to help make up for that gap and help get people the diversity of micronutrients they need to live healthy and fulfilling lives. So from a global level, that's what I would say, that we can provide those specifics from any given country, but that's the overall approach.
Great. Manpreet?
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Corinne. I think when we look at the consumption pattern at a country level, it is very important to understand what staple or what cereal grain or what food people are consuming in what amounts, and whether that is adequate to make an impact. We have WHO guidance there in terms of what is adequacy in terms of consumption. And then also to understand what really is the per capita consumption in different population groups. This is one information we don't have. We generally use one standard national per capita consumption number. So with FFI and Emory, we are now trying to assess, looking at two particular countries. We're doing this assessment in Bangladesh and Kenya, and looking at what is the per capita consumption in different population groups to be able to assess whether we'll even have an impact through fortification. And consumption is just one part of the whole picture, Paul. The other critical aspect is how much of that food is industrially milled or has the potential to be industrially milled. Because if a food is being processed at small scale in villages and in Chuckies and that village huskies, there is really not much potential to fortify that. It's not cost effective. You cannot ensure quality. So how much of that food is really being industrially milled, and what percentage of people would we be able to reach through that fortified food? So I think we really have to take care of all of this and then see from an optimal mix perspective, if we are suggesting rice fortification, what other micronutrient interventions are already ongoing in the country, and then assess what is the feasibility of rice fortification in an optimal mix. We don't want to provide excess micronutrients through fortification. So what is the dietary intake? What is coming from supplementation? And then what other foods are already being fortified? How would rice fortification fit really into that entire mix of interventions? I think from a country perspective, all of these aspects are very critical to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're coming to the end. So I want to thank all of you for being a part of this conversation. But I also want to say this is not the end of the conversation. We can continue this conversation, obviously online. And we are going to thank our guests now for contributing. And we encourage everyone to continue to discuss, to investigate, to read some of the links, and really get in this conversation on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and the different platforms. So please make sure you engage, and we'll drop into the chat just a reminder of those handles to follow. Obviously, all of our speakers and participants today also have social presences in different ways, shape and form, either organizationally or personally, and I'm sure would be happy to get some direct messages and be able to try and respond. There's also some research that's available, and we're putting that on the Future Fortified. And so thank you, Edwin, for sharing that. It's really important to be there. So this is the 7th in a series of monthly conversations on food fortification, leading up to the UN Food Systems Summit, which is later this month on the 23rd of September. And you can register. There's a platform, and everyone can be involved and see and listen in that conversation. And then also as we lead towards Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit in December. And both of the UN Food Systems Summit and the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit are really landmark opportunities for game-changing commitments on both large-scale food fortification and biofortification. And food fortification is at the core of the broader global dialogue on making food systems work better for particularly the most vulnerable. And our discussion today has been an important input. There's many countries out there that have included food fortification in their food system transformation strategies, and this is great to see, but there's obviously more to do. And in order for us to do this, I think data is really important to help countries plan some of these interventions as we move forward. But I would say, sometimes this can be seen as a little not the trendy thing, it's misunderstood. And I think there's a real role to take out and to really show that fortified food is something that can really be a part of the solution and really important intervention. And so there's going to be more information being shared shortly on how you can take part in the UN Food Systems Summit and how you can showcase some of the commitments that are going to be made around food fortification and how we finish that agenda. Obviously, there's a lot going on, but we need to finish that agenda. And more information on the series at the link, which is going to be put into the Q&A as well and the chat. So thanks again to everyone for being a part of today's event, and we look forward to having you join us again in October. Thank you all.
Merci à tous. Au revoir. À très bientôt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adiós. Gracias. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.